Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Oval PowerTalk. I am joined today by Dr. Sanjoy Hazarika. Dr. Sanjoy Hazarika is the Director of Center for Northeast Studies and Policies Research, an institute which is multidisciplinary in nature and looks into development issues in the Northeast region. He's also the widely acclaimed author of the book Rites of Passage, which looks into border crossings, imagined homelands in India's East and Bangladesh. He is also the recipient of Global Citizens Award, which was previously received by Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. Dr. Hazarika, thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Okay.
My first question to you is that despite being one of the richest regions in Northeast in terms of resources, the region in itself has lagged behind on several development indicators. What do you think are the factors contributing to this trend?
I think the primary factor has been connectivity and infrastructure problems, coupled with the fact that this is an area where large investments have not flowed, apart from two sectors. One is the oil and tea. Oil in terms of the public sector. Earlier there were some multinationals, Burma Shell and all that, but they pulled out. And tea has been, of course, a major employer as well as a producer of affluence, if not of wealth, in the region for over 150 years. Connectivity within the region has been very, very patchy. We have 8 states, not all of them are connected to each other 24/7. They are connected to each other, but not 24/7, because when the floods come or the landslides come, your land links are disrupted, as are your river routes and so on. So I think one of the things that we fail to do is use the natural resources which exist, the assets that are existing, like the waterways, in order to develop inland water transport and so on. So these are some of the gaps which I think we're feeling the impact of it really extensively now.
That brings me to my next question with respect to the efforts made by the Government of India. It is well known that the Government of India has made several efforts and created development agencies on the region, but the policy planning has failed to significantly address the development needs of the region. In this regard, do you believe that the central and the state governments need to be more proactive in reaching out to the industry? And the second part of my question is that attracting industry remains a key challenge in terms of encouraging growth in the region, owing to the prevalent security landscape and the poor governance records in all states. Given this scenario, what do you think are the specific measures that the government should execute in order to ensure a steady flow of trade and investment in the region?
Well, first of all, let's start from the basis that a basic premise that there is no steady flow of trade and investment and industry in the region, apart from the few that are well known: tea, oil and gas, and to some degree some relating to power and so on. Those are still in their infancy, shall we say. I think that what is really it's really tied into the point that you're making at the end about poor governance, poor security conditions, and a lack of investment. They're all tied together, because nobody's going to invest, put in the money or their people at risk if, one, they don't get land tenure and access to land and infrastructure in time. As you're aware, in the Northeast, especially in the hill areas, not necessarily in the plains, but in the hill areas, a lot of the properties, land rights, rest with the community, the clan, or with individuals. They don't rest with the government, unlike in other parts of the country. So that makes things rather difficult to handle. So acquisition of land is one thing. The other thing, as far as governance is concerned, it's not just a one factor. There is in the Northeast an infrastructure deficit. There is a governance deficit. There is a trust deficit. There's a connectivity deficit. And above all, I would say there is an integrity deficit. And there's a geographical gap. I mean, we're connected to the rest of India by a narrow neck of land that's 22 kilometers wide at the narrowest. We have 96% of our borders with other countries, and only 4% with the rest of India. So I think all these factors come into play when you're designing an industrial or an investment thing. It's not that the government hasn't poured in money; it has. But the question is, what's happened to that official investment, the public investment? It's not as visible in its signature as it is in other parts of the country. Why is that? Part is because of geographical conditions. These are not easy areas to build the kind of infrastructure that you want to design. And a CPWD approach won't work. That's one. The second is, again, what you refer to, security conditions. By the government's own definition, the Northeast is a disturbed region. You have very special laws, what some of us call draconian laws in place. You have the army, the paramilitary, and large police forces also located there. You've had a number of insurgencies which are on the wane. I mean, because public fatigue has grown, and when public fatigue grows, insurgencies tend to go down. But that having been said, there's a large element of extortion and intimidation which still exists. Large numbers of small arms float around and are accessible to armed groups and thugs. So I think unless you're able to deal with the larger problem, at least in terms of addressing and making clear to people that this is the way the government wishes to go. And for that, you need the collaboration and cooperation of the state governments. Now, I'm going to preempt your next question, which is possibly something of the Look East policy or the Act East policy. You cannot have an Act East and Look East policy unless the states themselves are connected and they buy into such a policy. This one size fits all, that Delhi will decide, therefore it's a good thing, therefore it should be done, and therefore you should accept what we say because we know better, doesn't interest people or engage them anymore. For instance, India is talking about Look East policy, but the Northeast is looking west. It's become, for the first time in its history, it's become a migrant producing region, not a migrant in migration, not an area where in migration is such a major issue. So I think some of these things need to be addressed. We need to understand that younger people are looking for different things. For instance, okay, so you talk about Look East policy. So the Northeast has always been looking east. It's connected to the east more than any other part of India. So Look East policy is not a policy for the Northeast. It's an Indian government policy for India to engage with Southeast Asia. In such a situation, a larger situation, the states which have ports will benefit. West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. And they have. They're the ones because trade takes place on the high seas. It doesn't take place on highways which are suspect, railways which may be damaged, and governments which don't move substantially actively. So we need to look at the larger Asian architecture that is being planned. Okay, there are initiatives from India to look east or act east and build roads and infrastructure and railway lines. And there is this Trans-Asian highway which is being built from Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City to Istanbul. And there is the Trans-Asian railroad which is also being built. But we tend to forget that China has a Look West policy where it's already invested $40 billion set up a company, and big infrastructure company, which is going to push super fast trains and super fast highways to Europe. So we are slowly we have not been able to even build the major highways into Burma. The Chinese are already thinking about moving to Europe and connecting to that economy. Because their vision of the future is 100 years from now.
Absolutely.
Ours is
recreating the Silk Route also.
Yes, and then we are sort of always reacting. We are very proactive in reacting. We are not proactive in envisioning the future, and that's the difference between them and us. If you're going to put the army there, and the army's been there for 57 years now. And in certain circumstances, the Armed Forces Special Powers are distributed there. You're sending a completely wrong signal to potential investors. Now, the Japanese may not particularly care about that because the focus of the Lucky's policy now, Act's policy, is to get Japan involved. So they actually build the infrastructure, the manufacturing hubs, the connectivity, what the foreign minister called the connectivity node, and the Northeast. In its own way, perhaps will grow, but it becomes a node, a point which will manufacture and perhaps receive in a limited way, with as far as Southeast Asia is concerned.
But moving on to my next question, do you think that, and there is a significant amount of literature which has identified the sectors which have immense potential for growth in the region, in that regard, do you think setting up marquee projects in all states is going to help development in the region? And by marquee projects, I mean a state-of-the-art university in, let's say, Assam, which imparts skill development, a state-of-the-art healthcare facility in Nagaland, so on and so forth.
This is an aspirational model. I don't see it happening in the near future. This is something you can aspire to, say, 15 to 20 years from now, maybe 10 to 15 years. Because first we have to get our act together locally. There are great suspicions between the states. There are differences between the states, and the 8 states are also at different stages of economic growth. So Assam has an advantage because it was the first state to embrace, in a way, the concept of modernization, in the 19th century. And the other states are very small. They're 1 million here, 2 million. Manipur is 3.6 or 3.7 million, and so is Tripura. So I think that there's a lot of catching up to do. There's a lot of basic work that needs to be done. We have the worst maternal mortality ratio in the country, Assam. So that has improved significantly, but it still needs to go to a level like 200 or 150 or something like that. We are at 300, which is unacceptable. It's a good drop from 490 10 years ago. So that's why I'm saying that, if you're thinking of visionary projects of the future, that's important to have as a possible benchmark, a goal that you can achieve. But first, we must get our act together and make sure that services are delivered and basic needs are met. I think although there's such a lot of talk about hydropower and power generation and so on, the region remains, one of the areas which is power deficient. And there are many of us who do not agree with the concept of large dams because they're ecologically extremely unsustainable and not people friendly at all. I mean, you need an approach that is ecologically sustainable, people friendly, and where the government actually is seen as a consultative agent, an agent that consults, that it doesn't say that this is what we're going to do and you can take it or lump it. So I think that's very important to have that kind of approach. In some areas, state governments have done that in issues of health and so on, governance in Nagaland. So, just cash in on the social capital that exists of people's capacities and traditions. That's going to be key.
Dr. Hazarika, moving on to my final question, since you mentioned basic needs over here, and you started a unique concept of boat clinics back in 2005. Can you tell us about the success and the challenges you have encountered in the past 10 years?
Well, the challenges, as in all major efforts, are never ending. There will always be the last mile. The last mile is never reached. But that remains our goal and our driving ambition, shall we say. The success of the program has depended on and is influenced by a few factors. One is that the government actually bought into the project and has supported our initiative, because you can't reach large numbers of people without the biggest stakeholder. I mean, for people to think that NGOs can run great initiatives, that's all very fine. But you have to be there for the marathon, not the 100 meters. And for that, the involvement of governments, stakeholders is very critical. And we have been very grateful for the support that the government, both of India and the state government, saw an innovative scheme and idea and decided this needs to be upscaled. That's one thing. The second thing is that you must understand the river. That's why I talked about earlier about dams or projects. You need to have an understanding of the ecological situation and the people of the cultural ecology of the river, of the people of the area. And I spent a lot of time, filming, traveling, talking to people, writing, and just researching, reading a lot. And those conversations, those travels were a huge help in understanding the condition of people and also what they wanted, not what I wanted or what somebody else wanted to do. Because very important to go with an attitude of humility. I don't really know. I think this is something that's to be done. What do you think? What are your ideas? And step by step, this came together. And I think the support has also come from local communities, because what I was saying at the beginning perhaps is one thing that's lacking, one of the deficits between the government of India or India and its northeast is a trust deficit. People don't believe what each other says, they don't believe what the other says. And when we went for the first time, people said, you're like a government department, you'll come in the flood time and then next floods you'll come. But then so we were coming every month, twice a month. So the same places, we went to different places. So you build that trust, which is the greatest gift that vulnerable communities can give you. On that trust, you build capacity, to understand issues, to be able to be involved in initiatives like this, family planning among Muslim communities. This is unheard of. Now they are coming forward because for 10 years we've been doing this, and they know that we are not, people who will just say something and just go away. We're there for the marathon. So I think that we've been able to involve people, so the government, individual enterprise and initiative, group, and the community. These three things come together. And when they come together, you have a tremendous impact. And the fourth point is as what I talked about, the understanding of the cultural ethos and the ecology of the river. Once you do that, because we depend on people who take the boat, who drive the boat, as it were, on the river. Just as medical teams on land are driven, we are also driven by pilots and masters. And we have to respect their knowledge of the river and appreciate their work, because it's a very unique knowledge. Without it, we wouldn't be able to reach out. So the last person, quote, in our team counts, and that enables us to reach the last person on the islands. And it's a unique intervention in the sense that it's only for the islands, and there are 2,500 of them on the Brahmaputra.
Dr. Hazarika, thank you so much for joining us for this interview. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.